Hey, so this is going to be my history video on 9.3 and 9.4, industrialization spreads and the reform of the industrialized world. So I just deleted, or my camera deleted the last video that I took, which was a perfect video, so hopefully this one will be just as good. So let's give it a shot. We start off with setting the stage, which is basically we go back to remembering how Great Britain and that area was very industrialized and took the industrialization, or the industrial revolution, very well due to its natural resources, which in the industrial development in the United States had the same exact resources. It had fast-flowing rivers, rich deposits of coal and iron. They had a supply of laborers and farm workers and immigrants. But during the War of 1812, Britain blockaded the United States, not allowing it to compete in international trade. So, therefore, they could not import goods that they could get from other countries. So that means that now they had to start with industrialization. So, like in Britain again, the textile industry. First thing to take off, a guy named Samuel Slater immigrates from Britain to the United States. He's a mill worker, but also an inventor. Comes to the United States, he has freedom. He builds the U.S. its first spinning machine, which just from there takes off and has the textile industry just go booming. And then after that, not only does Samuel Slater, make a huge difference, but then in 1813, Francis Cabot Lowell from Boston revolutionizes that spinning wheel and makes the factory, and that factory is the first textile factory, and that's able to mechanize every stage of the manufacturing of cloth. That's why now Lowell, Massachusetts is a town, because Francis Cabot Lowell just completely changed how spinning was looked at in the beginning. So thousands of young single women flocked from their rural homes on the farms and came into the city and started working in these factory towns so that they could have higher wages and have more independence for the things that they wanted. So basically, we get these factories made, and then they get workers from girls that want to move from their rural homes, so they come to the factory and get a job. I think this is falling, so I'm going to move this. Okay, there we go. Better. So then, as the textiles lead the way for the first thing to be industrialized, after that comes the clothing manufacturing and shoemaking. So now clothes are able to be made, designs, colors, everything. And after that, the shoes, instead of having crappy shoes, now they can have some solid shoes with, solid soles. The northeast of America expanded a lot in its industrializational growth. The United States was usually very agricultural, so those things were probably more affected by this than others. But during the last third of the 1800s, the country experienced a huge technological boom. Not like iPhone technological boom, but they were able to come up with smarter ways to work on the farms and have smarter methods. So we keep moving on to railroads and how they were able to completely change the way that food could be transported, the way people could be transported, basically a way to keep food fresh and get more workers where they needed to go so they could have more jobs. Huge thing that came out, steam engines, all that kind of stuff, locomotives, huge part of it. So as we get these factories, we come out with corporations, and corporations are businesses, factories, they could be anything really, but the business is owned by stockholders, and stockholders are people who buy solid shares of stock. And these stock aren't physical. You buy stock and you own a certain amount of a company. So these days you can buy stock in Google, you can buy stock in Apple, you can buy stock in any public or private company. And when you buy stock in these companies, you basically own a part of that company. It's a pretty simple idea, but these corporations were owned by these stockholders who were personally responsible for their debts and their profits. So however much they made, however much they lost, was affected by these stockholders. Large corporations in the late 1800s, like Standard Oil, founded by John D. Rockefeller, or the Carnegie Steel Company, founded by Andrew Carnegie. Um, these were all, let's see what it says, big business. The giant corporations that controlled entire industries also made big profits by reducing the cost of producing goods. In the United States, as elsewhere, workers earned lower wages for laboring long hours, while stockholders earned high profits for corporate leaders and made fortunes. So these stockholders and corporation owners just made tons of money, while the people that they paid, like these girls that worked in them, had decent wages but not great, and they had crazy work days, 16 hours work days, 18-hour work days. And I'll come back to that later when we talk about 9.4. After the U.S., we come back to Europe, and we can see how other countries like Belgium and Germany, they just come in and they become industrialized too. Again, these notes are from the book and also from Miss Pitts, so you guys can go over these. So Belgium is the first to follow Britain's lead in the British miracle. They see that Britain can be industrialized, so they think, why can't we? Why can't we? So resources such as iron and coal, they have the same thing, just like United States and Britain, and they adopted the spinning technology. Again, one of the first things to be industrialized. William Cockerell was kind of the Samuel Slater, but for Belgium, who smuggled tech designs and plans into Belgium. These were things such as machinery, the steam engine, locomotives, all the same things that can really make industrialism take off. So those are big parts of it. And the rest of Europe also experiences industrialization in the 1800s. So serf labor ran factories in regions around Moscow and St. Petersburg are another things that were industrialized. Northern Italy mechanized its textile production, producing silk. Spain and Catalonia processed more cotton than Belgium. Bohemia developed a spinning industry. So basically, all over Europe, these countries are taking off and finding out that they can, copy Britain and the United States and be able to industrialize too. The overall impact of the Industrial Revolution is massive. It has a worldwide impact. We talked about with the at the end of the French Revolution how there's a balance of power where each European country wants to work together to keep all of them in power. No one wants to have more power than the other person, so that France doesn't all of a sudden have all this power and they can take over for or just take Britain over, or a smaller country like Austria or Prussia and take them over because they have less power. That totally changes when we have global inequality, because industrialized countries have so much more power, technology, and they're so much more industrialized than the non-industrialized that that balance of power is completely thrown off. We also get a transformation of society, revolutions in agriculture, production, communication, transportation, like again with the trains. All aspects of society grow. There's a middle class, which helps the economy boom. So that's a big aspect too. And basically Western Europe and the United States completely dominate. Africa and Asia stay primarily agricultural, and so they don't get to experience the same things that Western Europe and the United States did. So that's basically the end of 9.3. We finish up basically how it reaches other countries. But as we get into 9.4, we realize some of the effects it has on people and some of the reforms that people make, because they aren't fond of the industrial world so far. So we start off with a term called laissez-faire, which refers to the economic policy of it's French for let do, or let the people do as they please. So it's basically for workers to set working conditions without interference of the government. This policy favors a free market, unregulated by the government. The term is French for let do. And basically it felt the economy would prosper if businesses were allowed free trade. So basically, leave the businesses alone, let them do what they want. They'll take it and they'll do what they want. So it's basically, if you have a lemonade stand and the government wants to control who you sell lemonade to, it could, affect your profit and how much you make. But if you control it and a good, really good place, hey, Susie's house down the street has really good, waterfront property, and so I can sell lemonade there. Maybe, I don't know. Again, this is 9.4. Miss Fifth made us a note sheet, so that was very nice of her. Thank you. And this whole idea of a free market is played in with Adam Smith, who's a professor at the University of Glasgow, Scotland, and he defended the idea of free economy, free markets, let the people do as they please. This also plays into capitalism, and capitalism is the economic system in which the goal of business is to make money, purely make money. As I go back to Adam Smith for a second, some of the ideas that he had, 3 natural laws of economics, the idea of self-interest, to people work for their own good, the law of competition, that people will always compete to make a better product, and the law of supply and demand, enough goods will be produced at the lowest possible price to meet the demand at the market economy. So we come back to capitalism, which is basically using money in the simplest way. You use money to make money. You use money to invest. You use money to spend to make more money. You use money to put somewhere, or invest to spend to make something, but you come out with profit. So somehow you use your money, and then whatever it's inputting. It's an input output. You have an input of money. The output's money. But there's that factor in the middle that changes. That's the business or whatever you invest in. From socialism, we get to, from capitalism we get to socialism, which is kind of messed up right there. And this is also produced by utilitarianism. Socialism was kind of a government intervention for economics. We'll come back to socialism when it comes to government, but right now it's the government comes in socialism and governs the businesses and won't let them be alone, and decides how they should do for the greater good of other people. Utilitarianism is very easy. It's advocated by Jeremy Bentham, and it's government policies that should promote the greater good. They also think that people morally, it's their moral obligation to want to promote the greater good too. Utopian ideas, we get to basically that the perfect place for living. It's a very Greek kind of way of thinking. There's a perfect man and there's a perfect place for living. Socialism of the government kind of promotes that with the greater good. Robert Owen, who's a British factory owner, is a huge advocate of this too. As we reach socialism for the government, it means government should actively run the economy and run its industries. In the book it says, in socialism, the factors of production are owned by the public and operate for the welfare of all. A more radical form of socialism is communism, which is introduced by Karl Marx, and his idea of communism is a complete form of socialism in which the means of production, all land, mines, factories, railroads, and businesses, would be owned by the people. So basically everything that makes up the government is owned by the people. Socialism has a little bit more government intervention, but it's made for the greater good again. Karl Marx makes the Communist Manifesto, which is talking about the large proletariat and the basically bourgeoisie, and the haves, the have-nots, and how there's that big clash between them, and eventually the lower or the larger proletariat will come up and overthrow the bourgeoisie and take over the middle class and all that good stuff. So Karl Marx is basically saying that the government's going to destroy itself because of the lower class, and that communism is a complete form of socialism where it's basically owned by the people. I kind of already talked about that. As we get into communism, we start talking about unions, which are volunteer workforces, and these people are from different, or can even be from the same factory, but they just don't like some of the reforms that they have. So, or some of the laws, they might not like how long they work. They might not like if they lose their hand working that they don't get compensation. So they make these unions so that they can press for certain reforms that they want. Unionization is a union who spoke for all the workers in a particular trade. And the way these unions would show their displeasure with these laws, that they would do these strikes, which is the them refusing to work. They just, go outside and say, we're not going to work until these laws are fixed. So eventually, as these reformers and unions basically force political leaders to look into the abuses caused by industrialization. So after striking and, protesting, they finally get the government and, the factory owners to be convinced and look into their, laws that they have for these people and fix them. So, in 1847, the Parliament passed a bill that helped working women as well as their children. These are also, behind these reform laws are child labor laws, laws protecting women and children, and laws regarding workday hours, which I was talking about. Social reform is a kind of social movement to change and improve society, and labor unions form to, collective bargaining, which is to work together for what they want. Then we get into more movements that are pushed by these unions. The abolition of slavery. Some key times when the slavery was completely abolished is in the British Empire. Finally, in 1833, another important date, the British Empire completely ends slavery. And then in the United States, they finally, in 1865, after the Civil War, they abolished slavery. And then in places like Puerto Rico, slavery was ended in 1873. Spain abolished slavery in the Cuban colony in 1886. And in 1888, Brazil ended its, massive slave trade that it had. After slave trade, we get to women's right, women's movements, which are women want, certain working conditions and laws against their working conditions. And they also want women's suffrage, which is the right to vote. This is huge. Giving women the right to vote, men feared that they would make, certain decisions that were, irrational or that weren't smart, and it would change the whole government. It's kind of a stupid thought because I don't think Okay, we're back. Sorry, my camera kind of shut off on me, but that's okay. We're still going. So we're talking about women's rights and how giving women the right to vote could completely change how the government would work. Men had this really kind of dumb idea, but that wouldn't happen. And so, basically, these reforms that people in unions and that the industrial world... Okay, I think my camera shut off again. I got about 30 seconds. Basically, the Industrial Revolution spread to all areas of life and affected people greatly because it allowed easier work, but then it also formed certain reforms that people didn't like. So that was 9.3 and 4. Working? Okay. Just want to say, hope this video helped, and thank you guys for your guys' video. It's going to help me a lot too. Okay, thanks.